You're listening to the free ad-sponsored re-release of American Election's Wicked Game, a weekly march through every presidential election from 1789 to 2024. To listen to all episodes right now ad-free, go to intohistory.com. Subscribers there enjoy ad-free listening, early access, bonus content, and more from a growing collection of great history podcasts. Start your free trial today at intohistory.com. It's January 6, 2021, in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. On this cold, gray Wednesday morning, Metropolitan Police Officer Mike Fanone sits with his elderly mother in her kitchen. Normally, at these regular breakfast dates, Mike and his mother sip coffee and make small talk. But today, they sit in amazed silence, their eyes glued to the TV as they watch the news.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's death involved.
After losing at the ballot box this past November, Donald Trump has been on the offensive. In the media, he's called the results of the 2020 election rigged. In the courts, he and his allies have filed more than 60 lawsuits in key battleground states. Most have been thrown out or ruled against due to lack of evidence. None changed the outcome of the election. Today, Trump and his supporters have gathered near the Capitol to pressure Congress and Trump's own Vice President Mike Pence to stop the official certification of Electoral College votes.
Here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them. Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
Mike's mother watches in horror, but Mike is less quick to panic. He voted for Trump last time around, and he knows that much of what the president says is just bluster. He stands up and gets ready for work, when he gets a call from his buddy and fellow cop, Jimmy. Hey, Jimmy. Mike, are you watching this? Yeah, the circus down at the Capitol? Yeah, it's wild. The old Don's really outdone himself this time, hasn't he? Mike, this is serious stuff. Commander's calling in hard gear, munitions, tear gas, rubber bullets. Oh, come on, Jimmy. Really? It's turning into a riot, Mike. We have to go in, now. All right. Yeah, I'm on my way. Mike kisses his mother goodbye and hurries to meet Jimmy at the station to get into uniform and head to the Capitol. There, the once peaceful protest has devolved into chaos. Angry rioters have breached the building's barricades. Without flinching, Mike and Jimmy pull out their batons and rush into the melee. Immediately, they are swept into the crowds. Mike feels fists pounding against him from all sides. As he crouches down, he sees a hand reach for his taser. He tries to push it away, but he's not quick enough. In horrible pain, Mike frantically looks around for Jimmy, but he's nowhere to be found. And as Mike is tased again, he hears the crowd cheer as a lone voice calls out, "Kill him." Mike pleads, "Don't do this. Please, I've got kids." But the voice calls out again, more specifically, "Kill him with his own gun." With the help of a few good Samaritans in the crowd, Mike managed to escape. He eventually found Jimmy, beaten within an inch of his life. Together, they scrambled to EMTs and were rushed to the hospital. There, Mike learned he had an increased level of troponin in his system, an indicator that he had suffered a heart attack. Not long after, Mike would retire after almost 20 years of police service. Later, he was shown footage from that moment, his body at the mercy of men and women full of rage. Seeing the images, he broke down into violent sobs. According to reports from the Justice Department, approximately 140 police officers were injured in the riot on the steps of the Capitol. One officer died as a result of a stroke following sustained injuries. 4 others would take their own lives. 4 civilians were killed in the chaos, which ultimately had no impact on the outcome of the election. On January 6, 2021, Vice President Mike Pence certified the results. Donald Trump would leave the White House, and in 2 weeks, Joe Biden would become the 46th President of the United States. 1 week later, Congress would adopt an article of impeachment against Donald Trump for inciting an insurrection. But as with his first impeachment back in 2019, Trump would evade conviction, but not the long shadow cast by January 6th. Trump's conduct would ignite many Americans against him, including many former supporters, and his words and actions that day would add to a growing list of legal troubles. They would ultimately serve as a prelude to Trump's third run for the White House, in what is perhaps the most extraordinary presidential campaign in American history. From Airship, I'm Lindsey Graham, and this is American Elections Wicked Game. Though he would not formally announce his bid for re-election until November of 2022, Donald Trump's third campaign for President of the United States arguably began before the end of his term as president. Immediately following the Capitol riots, many criticized Trump for his behavior on that day. Democrats were quick to label his actions as careless or criminally negligent. Even some Republicans, such as then Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, were on record calling January 6th a dark day for the country. In political circles, conventional wisdom was nearly unanimous. Trump's reputation was ruined. He would have no choice but to step away from American politics. But not for the first time, Trump defied conventional wisdom. Time would reveal that pundits had vastly underestimated his grip over the Republican Party and his enduring appeal to millions of voters. Through a sea of legal troubles, Donald Trump would embark on an improbable political comeback and set his sights on becoming the second person in history after Grover Cleveland to run and win 2 non-consecutive terms as president. Trump would animate his supporters by launching attacks on newly elected President Joe Biden. He would frame Biden as not only an illegitimate leader who stole the 2020 election, but as a frail, senile old man who was mentally and physically unfit to serve a second term. This is Episode 60, 2024, Part 1, Biden versus Trump, Incompetent Abilities. It's December 2021 at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Florida, just under 1 year since the infamous events of January 6th. Trump sits at his desk, a phone in hand, surrounded by members of his political team. They listen intently as the former president dresses down the man on the other end of the line, longtime U.S. Representative for Alabama's 5th Congressional District, Mo Brooks. Look, Mo, you want Trump in your corner, you better start talking right. I'm afraid I don't know what you mean, Mr. President. You want to win or not? Earlier this year, Mo Brooks retired from the U.S. House to run for the United States Senate in the upcoming midterm elections. Initially, Brooks secured Trump's endorsement by aligning himself with Trump's rhetoric about the 2020 election. But recently, Brooks has started to change his tune, and Trump is furious. Your poll numbers, Mo, it's very sad. You started up way high, with my endorsement way up high. Now people are saying they've never seen someone lose a poll lead so fast. Oh, it's early yet. The election is months away. Like nothing they've ever seen. They say without Trump, without endorsement, which is a beautiful thing. Lots of people want Trump's endorsement. You won't make it past the primaries. Mr. President, I stand by my words. It's time for the Republicans of Alabama to move beyond what happened in 2020. What happened in 2020 was the greatest fraud, the biggest. No one was ever cheated worse than me. They didn't have the votes. Where did the votes come from? No one knows. I believe the people of Alabama are ready for a new direction. I'm the only reason you're still even in the race. On the contrary, sir, I believe it's your rhetoric that's hurting me. Hearing this, the president grips the phone tight, his knuckles turning white. I don't know who's running your campaign, but he's a loser. It's an embarrassment, a big embarrassment, maybe the worst in Alabama history. You want to win, stop listening to them and start listening to Trump, or you'll see what happens. Are you threatening me? Get your shit together, Mo. Believe me, without Trump, you're not so great. You're nothing. On the campaign trail, Mo Brooks continued to encourage the Republicans of Alabama to put the 2020 election in the past. Months later, in March of 2022, Trump rescinded his support. Brooks ultimately finished third in the primary, well behind the Trump-endorsed winner, Katie Britt. This story was not unique to Alabama. Out of the more than 200 candidates Trump endorsed across the country, 93% of them won their primary contests. Many pundits on the left expressed dismay that Trump could still wield such political might in the shadow of January 6th. But for many on the right, Trump had earned his influence over the party. As president, he had made good on many campaign promises from 2016, including a vow to remake the American judiciary. Trump had successfully appointed 3 conservative Supreme Court justices, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, as well as numerous federal judges. And in the lead-up to the 2022 midterms, Trump's past success on this front would impact the lives of millions. On June 24, 2022, the Supreme Court voted 5-4 to overturn Roe v. Wade, ending the constitutional right to abortion upheld for 50 years. This landmark decision removed federal protections for abortion and returned the power to regulate abortion to the states. It was a ruling that further polarized an already divided country. Many pro-choice activists decried the decision as totalitarian and inhumane, while some of their pro-life counterparts flooded the streets in celebration. The GOP hoped that this overturning of Roe v. Wade would energize voters and increase turnout at the midterm elections. With the Democrats holding only a slim majority in the House and Senate, Republicans hoped to flip Congress. But the highly anticipated red wave never arrived. The Republicans only narrowly won back the House of Representatives, but the Democrats held the Senate, even flipping one seat in Pennsylvania. And some political analysts wondered if the issue of abortion had come back to bite the Republican Party. Others suggested it was Trump himself that had held his party back. While about 82% of Trump-endorsed candidates won their races in 2022, most were already favored incumbents. The more notable losses, such as TV personality Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania and former NFL star Herschel Walker in Georgia, shared a common trait. They had all publicly echoed Trump's claims about the 2020 election being stolen. But despite the lackluster results, Trump had no intention of changing his rhetoric or loosening his grip on the GOP. 1 week after the midterms, the former president stood behind a podium at his Mar-a-Lago estate.
In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
But even as Trump announced his candidacy and his vision for the future, the president's past was coming back to haunt him. 6 months after officially announcing his candidacy on April 4, 2023, Donald Trump was back behind a lectern at Mar-a-Lago. Earlier that day, Trump had been charged with 34 counts of falsifying business records. These charges were related to hush money payments given to Stormy Daniels, an adult film actor with whom Trump allegedly had an affair back in 2006. According to prosecutors, Trump's former lawyer Michael Cohen paid Daniels $130,000 to stay silent about the affair, lest it would harm his chances of winning the presidency in 2016. Hush money payments are not illegal. But Trump was accused of falsely categorizing the reimbursements paid to Cohen in an attempt to conceal their true nature, which would be a violation of campaign finance law. Many pundits suggested these criminal charges would be the end of Trump's presidential prospects. Still, to many Trump supporters, the case against him was simply the latest chapter in a years-long political witch hunt.
From the beginning, the Democrats spied on my campaign. Remember that? They attacked me with an onslaught of fraudulent investigations. Russia, Russia, Russia. Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. Impeachment hoax number 1. Impeachment hoax number 2.
Despite Trump's attempts to downplay it, the charges were just the beginning of his legal troubles. 2 months after the hush money indictment, Trump was indicted again, this time for removing classified documents when he left the White House. An FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago the previous year had turned up hundreds of documents containing highly sensitive national security information. If found guilty of these charges, Trump would be in violation of the Espionage Act, an offense punishable by prison time. Then, 2 months later, on August 1st, the Department of Justice formally charged Trump for attempting to overturn the results of the 2020 election. According to federal prosecutors, Trump knowingly spread false claims about voter fraud and broke several laws when he attempted to obstruct the certification of the election on January 6th. Then, 2 weeks after this third indictment, a grand jury in Fulton County, Georgia, indicted Trump a fourth time for his efforts to overturn the results of the election in that state. A key piece of evidence for the prosecution was a recording of a phone call Trump placed to Georgia's Secretary of State in January 2021. On the call, Trump seemed to be pressuring the official to commit election fraud by encouraging him to find 11,780 votes, roughly the amount by which Trump lost to Biden in Georgia. While many on the left welcomed these legal challenges as justice at work, many on the right saw them as outright political persecution. Trump's legal team sought the ultimate defense, presidential immunity. They hoped to argue that a sitting or former president should be immune from prosecution for actions taken while in office. To succeed with his bold defense, they would have to obtain a favorable Supreme Court ruling. And in deciding such a complex and controversial question, the court would have to balance the constitutional boundaries of executive power with accountability under the rule of law. But while Trump's legal team was busy planning his strategy, many of Trump's opponents were hoping to capitalize on the former president's misfortune.
Tonight, the race for the White House takes flight. Welcome to the first debate of the 2024 presidential campaign, live at Fiserv Forum in Milwaukee.
On August 23, 2023, 8 Republican candidates took the stage to present their case for why they should be the party's nominee for president. Among the hopefuls were Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, and former Vice President Mike Pence. One notable absentee was Donald Trump. In the weeks prior to this debate, something surprising happened to the embattled former president. His approval ratings went up. Among the contenders in the primaries, Trump remained the clear frontrunner, polling 53% to second-place Ron DeSantis' 16%, striking evidence that Trump's hold over the party was stronger than ever. With this political wind at his back, Trump decided to let his competitors battle it out in Milwaukee while he held a rival event in the comfort of Mar-a-Lago. Trump's opponents criticized him for skipping this debate and every other Republican debate that followed. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who sought to position himself as a moderate, anti-Trump candidate, was especially outspoken.
Donald Trump hides behind the walls of his golf clubs and won't show up here to answer questions like all the rest of us are up here to answer. He put $7 trillion on the debt. He should be in this room to answer those questions for the people you talk.
Ramaswamy and DeSantis were less quick to condemn the former president, choosing instead to echo Trump's rhetoric in an attempt to appeal what seemed to be the mainstream faction of the party. But their efforts were in vain. As DeSantis, Ramaswamy, Christie, and Pence struggled to gain traction, the only candidate who posed a noteworthy challenge to Trump was the former governor of South Carolina, Nikki Haley. With her background as a U.S. ambassador to the UN, Haley represented a more diplomatic option.
This is exactly why Margaret Thatcher said, if you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman.
But despite Haley's appeal, her candidacy never represented a real threat to the former president. Trump would soon sweep the primaries and become the Republican Party's nominee for the third consecutive time. And with Trump on the ascendancy, America's political divisions looked more stark than ever. And just 2 months after the first Republican primary debate, an event halfway around the world would further expose and exacerbate those divides. On October 7, 2023, Hamas terrorists carried out a brutal, coordinated attack against Israel, murdering 1,200 people and kidnapping over 200. It was the deadliest assault on the Jewish people since the Holocaust. In the immediate aftermath of October 7th, President Biden was quick to reaffirm America's alliance with Israel and Israel's right to defend itself. But as the Israeli retaliation against Hamas grew in intensity, the Biden administration faced mounting pressure to call for a ceasefire. While many voters saw U.S. support of Israeli actions as tacit complicity in the slaughter of civilians, many others believe that Washington should stand by its ally. Joe Biden struggled to walk this delicate foreign relations tightrope, but Donald Trump was unequivocal. He would support Israel no matter what. But on the campaign trail, Trump could not be too triumphant because his campaign would soon be confronted with a crisis of its own.
From inside, we are starting to hear that there are guilty verdicts.
On May 30th, 2024, Donald Trump was found guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records, marking the first time in American history that a former president has been convicted of a felony. Many on the left celebrated. Many on the right were outraged. Still, for Donald Trump, the stakes had undeniably been raised. If he wanted to maintain his influence over the party and his personal liberty, he would have no choice but to defeat Joe Biden. And at the first debate of the 2024 presidential election, Trump would waste no time going on the attack.
This episode is brought to you by National Geographic, presenting its new documentary film, Endurance. Follow the greatest survival story ever told, unpacking the legendary feat of polar explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton, who kept his crew alive for over a year, despite losing their ship in frigid pack ice. Over a century later, a team of modern-day explorers set out to find the sunken ship. Endurance, now streaming on Hulu and Disney+.
Blinds.com is kicking off the savings early with Black Friday mega deals all month long. A Blinds.com design expert can help you make the perfect selection on your schedule. We can even handle everything from measure to your whole home installed for just one low cost. With over 25 million windows covered, Blinds.com is the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings. Save up to 45% on select styles, plus a free professional measure right now at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
It's June 27th, 2024 in Atlanta, and the first presidential debate of the year is underway. To begin, CNN's Jake Tapper and Dana Bash welcome the millions of viewers watching around the world.
We're live from Georgia, a key battleground state in the race for the White House. In just moments, the current U.S. president will debate the former U.S. president as their party's presumptive nominees, a first in American history.
Typically, debates are held after the Republican and Democratic national conventions. However, due to the unique circumstances of Biden and Trump having also competed in the previous election, an early debate was agreed upon by both candidates.
This is a pivotal moment between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump in their rematch for the nation's highest office. Each will make his case to the American people with just over 4 months until Election Day.
Tapper and Bash lay out the unusual rules for this debate. They explain that in a break from tradition, there is no studio audience, and that in an attempt to maintain order, the candidates' microphones will be muted when the other is speaking. Once they're done explaining the rules, the hosts then invite the participants to the stage.
Now, please welcome the 46th President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Biden shuffles onto stage, squinting in the glare of the studio lights. The 81-year-old slowly makes his way over to the lectern.
And please welcome the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump.
Trump swaggers on stage, looking ready for a fight, his trademark red tie hanging low below the belt. The two men do not shake hands, and once both candidates are in position, the debate begins. Biden is invited to speak first. After being asked a question about rising prices under his administration, the president tries to come out swinging by pinning the country's economic problems on his predecessor. But the substance of his answer is undermined by his frail, mumbling delivery.
We got to take a look at what I was left when I became president and what Mr. Trump left me. We had an economy that was in free fall. The pandemic was so badly handled. Many people were dying. All he said was, it's not that serious. Just inject a little bleach into your arm. You'll be all right. The economy collapsed. There were no jobs. Unemployment rate rose to 15%. It was terrible. And so what we had to do is try to put things back together again.
When it's his turn to respond, Trump speaks with characteristic self-assurance.
We had the greatest economy in the history of our country. We have never done so well. Everybody was amazed by it. Other countries were copying us. We got hit with COVID. And when we did, we spent the money necessary so we wouldn't end up in a Great Depression, the likes of which we had in 1929. By the time we finished, so we did a great job. We got a lot of credit for the economy, a lot of credit for the military, and no wars, and so many other things. Everything was rocking good.
Even at the outset of this debate, the contrast between the two men is stark. Trump is unfaltering. Biden, on the other hand, is noticeably shaky. When the moderator asks a question about the national debt, Biden loses his train of thought.
Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death, and he's destroying Medicare.
But when asked about immigration, Biden starts strong, before then stumbling over his words yet again.
What I've done since I've changed the law, what's happened? I've changed it in a way that now you're in a situation where there are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. That's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we can do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
For years, Trump had been attacking Biden for his age and acuity. Biden's debate performance seemed to validate Trump's past remarks, and it sent the media into a frenzy.
That was painful. I love Joe Biden. I work for Joe Biden. He didn't do well at all.
I think it was like maybe the worst debate I've ever seen in my entire life.
Did you see the debate? In case you missed it, don't worry, so did one of the contestants.
At the heart of this hand-wringing lay a serious question about Biden's cognitive fitness, as articulated by Democratic Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi.
Now, again, I think it's a legitimate question to say, is this an episode or is this a condition?
In the aftermath of this debate, the Biden team went into damage control. The first line of defense was to claim that he had a cold. However, most pundits on both sides of the aisle were skeptical. Even his most ardent defenders were struggling to argue that his age was not becoming an issue. And following the debate, Biden's approval ratings plummeted while Trump soared in the polls. At a campaign rally days later, Biden tried to explain.
I don't speak as smoothly as I used to. I don't debate as well as I used to. But I know what I do know. I know how to tell the truth.
He made a plea to the American people. Rather than judge him for his debate performance, judge him for his success as a servant of the people. He begged Americans to look not at his age, but at his administration's policies. In his 2020 campaign for president, Joe Biden had promised a time of healing in America.
We shall write an American story of hope, not fear, of unity, not division, of light, not darkness.
And for many Democrats, Biden had stayed true to his word. Portions of the party felt his time in office was largely a period of hope, renewal, and restoration. An early win for the administration was helping mark the end of the COVID-19 pandemic. By rolling out a mass vaccination program, Biden helped America through the worst of the crisis and steered the country toward economic recovery. He was lauded by climate activists for his Inflation Reduction Act, the largest investment in green energy in U.S. history. Biden made good on his word to nominate the first black woman to the Supreme Court, and Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson was sworn in on June 30th, 2022. After Trump's 3 conservative Supreme Court picks, Jackson's appointment was seen by Biden supporters as monumental. President Biden also proved to be a competent global leader, rallying the world to stand with the people of Ukraine as they defended themselves against a Russian invasion. But for many Americans, the Joe Biden years failed to live up to his lofty promises. In particular, Biden faced criticism following America's withdrawal from Afghanistan, as the Taliban's reclamation of the country signaled an embarrassing failure for the West. Nor was Biden's presidency entirely free of scandal. Since before the 2020 election, Biden's Republican adversaries had been looking for dirt. They thought they'd found it in the shape of a bribe that Biden had allegedly taken from a Ukrainian energy company, Burisma Holdings. Biden did have ties to Burisma. His son Hunter sat on its board of directors. And with the help of an FBI informant, House GOP investigators had launched an impeachment inquiry into the president's business dealings in Ukraine. But despite multiple witness interviews and the vociferous support of the right-wing media, the allegations against Joe Biden were never substantiated. Even the FBI informant admitted that he had fabricated the story. Still, House Republicans refused to back down. They widened their search to include the entire Biden family, zeroing in on Hunter Biden, whose business affairs allegedly involved tax evasion and foreign lobbying violations. Hunter would eventually plead guilty to tax evasion, and Republican investigators would continue their efforts to link Joe Biden to his son's misdemeanors well into 2024. But with the election looming, the central issue for Joe Biden was neither his administration's record nor his family's finances. It was his age. No matter how well he campaigned, he could never escape the impact his age had on the public's perception of him. Critics and supporters alike had given him monikers like Grandpa or Sleepy Joe, and Biden did little to stave off these criticisms. And following his disastrous debate night, Biden made a series of public missteps. He introduced Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky as President Putin. Shortly thereafter, he mistakenly called Vice President Kamala Harris Vice President Trump. It was increasingly clear to a number of Americans that these were not atypical slip-ups. They seemed to be evidence of a progressive decline. Inside Biden's party, the anxiety was mounting, and soon a coalition of concerned supporters would decide that there was only one way to deal with Joe Biden's age problem: to push the beleaguered president out.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first, like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. The holidays are here, and you know what that means? It's time to get your friends and family the gifts they deserve. Take the stress out of shopping with Amazon's great deals and low prices on a huge range of items from toys to tech and much more. Whoever you're gifting for, Amazon has great prices on everything you need this holiday season. Shop Black Friday week starting November 21st.
It's July 2024, a few weeks after the first presidential debate. President Biden is at his vacation home in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. The 81-year-old has recently contracted COVID-19, and he's recuperating in isolation. Biden lowers himself into a lounge chair overlooking the ocean. He's exhausted, demoralized, and even offended by the calls from within his own party for him to drop out of the presidential race. Those calls have been growing louder in recent weeks, as Biden's numbers have plummeted in the polls. But the president remains defiant. He still believes he has what it takes to beat Donald Trump, and what happened on the debate night doesn't change that. As Biden struggles to relax, his phone rings again. He checks to see who's calling before picking up. It's the former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Hello, Nancy.
Hello, Mr. President. How are you feeling?
I'm doing better. Thanks for checking on me.
Of course, Mr. President. You know I care about you. I care about you and your family a great deal.
Is this really why you called, Nancy? To tell me how much you care?
Mr. President, you know my priority is with the party. It always will be. And we have to make sure you-know-who never steps foot in the White House again.
That's exactly what I'm trying to do. And calls like these aren't helping.
We have polling, Mr. President, that indicates to us you cannot win this election.
Well, I've got my own numbers, and by God, I am winning this thing.
We've been over the figures, Mr. President, many times. The numbers tell a different story.
Oh, come on, Nancy. That's a bunch of malarkey.
Well, forgive me, but the feeling is that you're not fit to continue your campaign. Pains me to say it, Joe, but you need to step down.
Now look, I'm not going anywhere.
There's been a loss of faith in you across the board. We could lose more than the presidency. We could lose the House, too.
But I feel fine, Nancy. I had a bad night. Who doesn't at our age?
Joe, do the right thing for your country, for your grandchildren.
Have a good day, Nancy.
Joe, this has to be your decision.
Give my regards to Paul. Goodbye, Nancy.
Goodbye, Mr. President.
Joe Biden received multiple phone calls of this kind. Pleas from Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, all reiterating Pelosi's position. There was only one way to give the Democrats a true shot at winning the general election. Biden had to go. But while Biden was losing his grip on the reins of the Democratic Party, an egregious act of political violence would redefine the race. On July 13th, at a Donald Trump campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, a 20-year-old man climbed onto the roof of a warehouse, lined up his AR-15 assault rifle, and fired a volley of shots toward a stage set up 400 feet away. One of the bullets struck the former president's ear. Another hit and killed an attendee. Had Trump not turned his head moments before the shots were fired, he too would likely have been killed. Seconds later, a Secret Service sniper shot and killed the shooter, whose motivation for the attempted assassination would never become clear. As pandemonium broke out, Trump was rushed off stage by the Secret Service. Before he was escorted to safety, however, the former president raised his fist into the air. With blood running down his cheek, he shouted the word "fight." And the image of a bloodied, defiant Donald Trump was adopted by his campaign team heading into the Republican National Convention, where it would appear on T-shirts, coffee mugs, and calendars. And in the aftermath of the assassination attempt, there was bipartisan appeal to lower the political temperature. Among the voices calling for calm was the embattled President Biden.
Look, there's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick. It's sick. It's one of the reasons why we have to unite this country. We cannot allow for this to be happening. We cannot be like this. We cannot condone this.
But the assassination attempt served to further underscore the contrast between the two candidates. Amid ongoing discussions about Biden's frailty, Trump's survival of an attempt on his life seemed to highlight his strength and resilience. In the wake of the shooting, the distance between them in the polls continued to widen. But just 6 days after the assassination attempt, in his acceptance speech at the Republican National Convention, Trump adopted a subdued, gracious tone.
Let me begin this evening by expressing my gratitude to the American people for your outpouring of love and support following the assassination attempt at my rally on Saturday.
Wearing a bandage over his ear where the bullet had made contact, Trump began his speech with a message of unity and an emotional recounting of his brush with death. But he eventually veered into what one pundit called a typical Trump-like rally, with an off-script discussion of his accomplishments and the current state of politics. Over the course of his 90-minute speech, Trump spoke about a litany of issues including the economy, immigration, and the job market. And though he never made reference to President Biden by name, he called out the Democratic Party at large and painted himself as a victim of political persecution.
And we must not criminalize dissent or demonize political disagreement, which is what's been happening in our country lately at a level that nobody has ever seen before. In that spirit, the Democrat Party should immediately stop weaponizing the justice system and labeling their political opponent as an enemy of democracy.
After the convention, many pundits agreed that Trump had succeeded in rallying the party behind him. It was, as one journalist wrote, not the Republican Party of 2016. It was now a MAGA Republican Party. This was perhaps further evidenced by Trump's non-traditional pick for vice president, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, a political newcomer who one Republican insider once described as more Trump than Trump. But while the former president was bringing his party together, the Democratic Party was coming apart at the seams. In the wake of the Republican National Convention, the calls for President Biden to step aside only grew louder. In the minds of many pundits and many Washington insiders, the prognosis was clear. With Biden on the ticket, the Democrats had no chance of victory. Biden remained defiant until Sunday, July 21, 2024, when he released a letter announcing his decision to step down from the 2024 Democratic presidential nomination. A few days later, in a televised address from the Oval Office, Biden explained his decision.
I believe my record as president, my leadership in the world, my vision for America's future, all merited a second term. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation.
Biden's decision to end his re-election campaign was a shock to many. And although it was a truly extraordinary decision, It was not without precedent. The last incumbent president to choose not to seek re-election was Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1968. But the first president to walk away from a chance at another term was America's very first commander-in-chief. In September of 1796, George Washington explained his decision not to seek a third term, writing, "I shall also carry with me the hope that after 45 years of my life, dedicated to its service with an upright zeal, the faults of incompetent abilities will be consigned to oblivion, as I myself must soon be to the mansions of rest." Joe Biden started his career in Washington as one of the history's youngest senators. He ended his career as history's oldest president. Biden was quick to endorse his vice president, Kamala Harris, as the Democratic nominee, and immediately, a record number of donations poured in to her campaign, leaving Donald Trump now up against an entirely new candidate, and any advantage he had gained seemed suddenly lost. Still, as America found itself entering a new chapter of the election story, many wondered if Kamala Harris would be able to seize the moment and usher the country into a new era, or if Donald Trump would take back the nation that he claimed he never lost in the first place. There's only one episode left in our march from 1789 to 2024. The final episode on the 2024 election will come out shortly after the election is decided. But in the meantime, thank you for coming on this journey. Icebergs, jagged rocks and rocky straits, mutinies, misfortune, and broadside battles. There are more tales of the sea than survivors to tell them, but the podcast Shipwrecks and Sea Dogs is doing a good job, and you can listen to all episodes of that podcast plus many others, including American Election's Wicked Game, without interruption by subscribing at intohistory.com. Shipwrecks and Sea Dogs is one of my favorites from last year, a podcast about the greatest mishaps, misfortune, and misadventures of the sea. You'll hear stories of corruption, greed, bad intentions, and just plain horrible decision-making that resulted in some of the worst maritime disasters from all over the world. And some of these are more recent than you think. All episodes are ad-free, including bonus content and more at intohistory.com. Subscribe now at intohistory.com. This episode contains reenactments and dramatized details, and while in most cases we can't know exactly what was said, all our dramatizations are based on historical research. American Election's Wicked Game is an Airship production, created, hosted, and executive produced by me, Lindsey Graham. Editing by Mohammed Shazib. Sound design by Molly Bach. Music by Lindsey Graham. Co-executive produced by Stephen Walters in association with Ritual Productions. Written by Joe Viner and Stephen Walters, with additional writing and research by Josh LeBlanc.
How far would you go in your pursuit of the American dream? Would you put in the work?
911, what's your emergency?
Would you take a big risk?
What's the problem? What's the problem?
Would you cheat? Would you lie?
Were they shot? Were they shot?
Would you kill?
My mom is dead. My mom is right there.
I'm Jeremy Schwartz, and I'll be taking you inside the minds of some of our most notorious felons and outlaws, exploring the dark side to the American dream. You'll meet the picture-perfect brothers who teamed up to kill their parents, the thief who stole babies and ruined countless lives, the crypto king who siphoned off billions in the name of saving the world, and plenty more. From assassins to gangsters to killers and con artists, whatever the case, whoever the criminal, you don't know the full story until now. Go to AmericanCriminal.com or search for and follow American Criminal wherever you get your podcasts.